Have you ever felt lost, insignificant, or unsure about your purpose? Abraham, a man who started with nothing but a flawed past, found himself chosen by God to change the course of history. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't famous. He didn't have special credentials, but his obedience, his willingness to follow God's voice even when it didn't make sense, changed everything. Today we'll dive into Abraham's incredible journey, showing how obedience to God led him from an ordinary life to becoming a foundational figure in Christianity. What can we learn from Abraham's faith, and how can his story change your life forever? Section 1. Abraham's ordinary beginnings. Abraham was just an ordinary man living in a pagan society. He had no grand lineage. His father wasn't a prophet. He wasn't someone you'd expect God to choose for a monumental mission. He was like many of us, a sinner flawed with a past and baggage. Yet God called him. God spoke to Abraham in the most unlikely way. Leave everything. Leave your comfort. Leave your family. Go to a place I will show you. Genesis 12. 1-2 doesn't mention Abraham's qualifications, only his obedience. And in that moment, Abraham chose to follow. He didn't have it all figured out, but he trusted God's voice. You don't need to have it all together for God to use you. Like Abraham, God isn't looking for your perfection, just your obedience. Your past does not define your future, but your obedience to God's call does. Are you willing to step out in faith? Section 2. Abraham's faith tested in the wilderness. Abraham's journey wasn't easy. He didn't get the luxury of an easy path or an immediate breakthrough. There was famine, there were struggles, there were moments when he doubted. Even after trusting God to lead him, life still wasn't perfect. But it was in the wilderness that God's promises were made clear again. Genesis 13:14-15 recounts when God said to Abraham, "Lift up your eyes and look around. All the land you see I will give to you." In the wilderness, God revealed his plans for Abraham's future. The struggles weren't wasted. They were part of the process. God's promises don't come without a test. If you're in the wilderness right now, feeling uncertain, feeling weak, it doesn't mean God has abandoned you. It means he's preparing you for something greater. Can you keep trusting in the promise when the path is unclear? God's faithfulness is always stronger than your struggles. Section 3. The ultimate test, the sacrifice of Isaac. The greatest test of Abraham's faith came when God asked him to sacrifice Isaac, his son, the child of promise, the one he had waited for, the one he believed would be the one to carry on God's covenant. Yet God asked for everything. Genesis 22:2. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there. This wasn't just a test. It was the ultimate trial of faith. Could Abraham trust God's promises even when it meant losing everything? Could he still obey? What is God asking you to surrender? What are you holding on to that might be hindering God's blessing? Sometimes we hold on to things that God is asking us to release, believing they are more important than his plans. Will you choose obedience even when it costs you? Section 4. God's faithfulness in Abraham's obedience. When Abraham obeyed, God showed up. Just as Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac, God intervened and provided a ram in the thicket, sparing Isaac's life. Abraham's faith led to provision. Genesis 22:12. Do not lay a hand on the boy. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. God didn't just stop at sparing Isaac. He reaffirmed the promise that Abraham's descendants would be as numerous as the stars. When we are obedient, God's provision always follows. Obedience leads to blessing. God might not always provide in the way we expect, but he will always provide in the right way. What has God called you to surrender, and are you ready to see his provision in your life? Abraham's story is a reminder that obedience to God changes everything. It reshapes your life, transforms your circumstances, and impacts the world around you. No matter where you start, God can use your faith and obedience to do incredible things. What is God asking you to obey today? Are you ready to step out in faith just like Abraham? Leave a comment below and share how you are stepping out in obedience in your own life. And if this video encouraged you, share it with someone who needs to hear that their obedience matters. Abraham's obedience changed the world. Will yours? Let's continue to live with the kind of faith that transforms. Don't let fear hold you back from stepping into God's plan.